to address the way we're conducting the meeting, but we don't have everybody here. Regardless, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have staff make their presentation uninterrupted, unless we have like little clarification questions like what does ESSA mean or something along those lines, but try to keep the substantive questions, make notes of them, and then each board member at the end will be given an opportunity to address you with their questions, because these have kind of briefings have turned into workshops, and I want to keep it a briefing, and I think that that's probably the best way to go about doing that. So we're going to keep track of our questions and let these guys present, and then at the end, each board member will be given an opportunity to ask questions. Are we clear on that? Excellent. All right, so we have two very capable gentlemen here to talk about civics curriculum. We have Mr. K, and we have another man who's not in my agenda.
Can you hear me?
It's not on.
Can you hear me? Okay, I can speak loud. Okay, I guess it's working now. My name is Matthew Kay. I'm the coordinator for social studies and advanced courses, and joining me is Stephen McGinley. He's our social studies instructional coach for 6th through 12, so secondary, but also his background is as a civics teacher. So he has a real, applicable reason to be here as well for that. So we're here to brief on the request about the landscape of civics in Lee County. The request was kind of a two-part request. The first one was, what is the current landscape of civics in Lee County? And then what is the Lee County School District doing to be proactive with legislation, pending legislation, governor executive orders, and so forth. So we produced a document for you that's on the board docs. And we tried to address each of those items individually and show how they relate to one another. And the scope of this particular document is civics at the middle school level. So just to clarify, and that's a note at the bottom, there are civics standards K through 12. So there's first grade civics standards that teachers and students would be working with. But the nature of the request to me seemed explicitly about the middle school civics course. So there's a grade, it's really a middle school, but typically it's taught in grade 7 civics course. And that is the subject of the executive order and the legislation. And so that's what we aligned this document toward particularly, although we do have efforts to cover K through 12 civics. Currently, the course is a middle school course. It's taught mostly in grade 7. And it's part of state legislation. So there are grounding principles and standards and benchmarks that apply. And of course, with everything, we comply with legislation, and we offer the course, and we support it as part of our academic services. But earlier this year, part of the governor's executive order was a full review of the civics materials. That was the term used, and that includes test item specifications, instructional materials, the EOC, and of course, exam as well. That review is currently going on right now. That's open until October 14th for public review. We've made stakeholders aware of that and taken efforts to make sure that we get as much coverage as possible because it's a voluntary. Any citizen can take part in that civics review. Okay, and so with that in mind, we are just at this point monitoring. We don't have the results of that review have not been released. And ultimately, the results of that review will probably be what drives any type of revision of the current civics course and materials. So at this point, we're monitoring, we're taking part, we're advertising that and doing our part in that. So currently, our support efforts are along the course of middle school civics. We have, like with any of our courses, curriculum maps, instructional guides, teacher supports, assessments, lessons, things that we push out, and a lot of our training will be aligned directly to that. We also host leading and learning meetings once a quarter with teachers that have been selected from each site, and we review the curriculum with them, and we review best practices, and we try to align to support those teachers directly, so it's not just a social studies meeting, but rather a civics meeting. And we also work with a variety of community stakeholders and organizations across the spectrum. So this would include working with the foundation, who brings a lot of outside groups to our attention, but also if they directly address us, we do what we can and support them as best we can. And they're all listed in there, some of the different organizations that we work with. We also support academic competitions for students, including mock trial, history fair, Model UN, National Honor Society. All of these have opportunities for students to engage in citizenship. And we also have, well, I should say you have the Student Advisory Committee, where you have a student represent the body on the school board, which is a great example of citizenship in action for our students. And we also work with some of these community organizations to build understanding and common conversations about how some of their interests and passions are included within the curriculum, and we work to align those as best as possible, because ultimately we want to make sure that we cover the curriculum that we're charged with instructing.
Are there any board member comments or questions on civics curriculum? Ms. Morgan.
So shame on me if it's there on the website, but it occurs to me, I am frequently asked, or comments are made about the fact that we don't teach civics in school anymore. Do we have anything on the website that specifically talks to how we educate our students about government, about civics, that shows the K-12 continuum of education, and then specifically talks about what happens in this one course? Do you?
To my knowledge, we don't have something devoted to that intention, no,
Okay. Thank you.
at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that there are a lot of community organizations that want to get involved. How do we handle the community organizations that have a very, very specific ideological bent?
Well, we always try to redirect back to the teaching of the standards as much as possible. So our standards are what drive our instruction and our practice. And that is part of, in the last column up there, I identified the two community interests with high frequency that tend to come to our office, and how these are built into our standards already, and how we support the instruction of those standards. If communities have interest as far as student competitions or student involvement, we now have ways in which communities can interact with the district through Peach Jar and other opportunities. But one of the things we don't try to do is, I don't try to act as a direct liaison from one organization to send it out to teachers, and because that might imply a message of expectation, and so
Yeah,
that's something we really don't do.
Yeah, to me, that is something, especially in today's political climate, that we have to be really, really careful of, because I remember, and this is in the past, that there was a group that was doing a particular kind of competition, and we just have to be really careful that we don't, in pleasing one segment of society here, that we don't alienate other people. So I not that you're doing, but I'm just making a comment that I think with the new push from Governor DeSantis, that there are going to be more and more of these groups that to handle them.
Right. Well, and absolutely to your point, we have appropriate channels for that type of request, and we want to make sure we adhere to those as best possible. And from that point, we always just go back to these are the standards that we teach, and it's a pretty comprehensive curriculum, and we welcome support of our community always. That's something we.
Right,
but
right,
there are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but all I'm saying is this, to me, this is a hot button area that a lot of bells and whistles could go off if we're not super, super, super careful in vetting which community groups are going to be partnering with.
Yeah. Thank
Ms.
you.
Gittens.
Yep, absolutely.
I agree with the earlier comment about having something generic that says, yes, we do. And this is very thorough and in-depth, but something that we could say to someone, go to this website and you can see, maybe just some type of a handout, because I know as we get deeper into a political season, that's a question that happens all the time. Well, what are you doing? And you're not doing it. So something just basic and generic, and if you want more, go here and look at this.
Okay,
Would be good.
thank you.
Ms. Fisher?
So currently and formally, we're teaching civics only at 7th grade. Is that what you said?
No, so at 7th grade is a course explicitly devoted towards civics. The title of the course would be M/J Civics for middle school civics.
Okay.
But civic standards appear throughout the K-12 curriculum in continuity. So there is a first grade set of civic standards that are intertwined within civics education, or within first grade education as well.
Okay, so then looking at K through 5, exactly how is that presented? How is that integrated into what?
So one of the things, and just to share as well, I know the question came up, our curriculum maps and instructional guides are linked off of the Lee Schools website. So parents and community members do have access to go out there, and when they go to the teaching and learning page and they go to curriculum, if they click on elementary, there's a folder that says social studies, and you can see the first grade and what is being instructed. You can go to 2nd grade, see what's being instructed, and it gives a scope and sequence for the year. Once you hit the middle grade folder, though, you will actually see the scope and sequence for the year, and it outlines when we teach citizenship, when we're looking at those forms of government, how many days we're spending on those. So all the work that this team up here has put out there, our community does have access to see how it plays out K-12. So that is available for them to view there, and it'll give a broad idea of what our teachers are instructing, when they're instructing, and for how long. So that would outline those high-level pieces that I think you're looking for.
Great. Ms. Jordan, do you have any comments?
No,
Questions?
I'm the follow.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Fisher, you weren't done.
I was just going to ask her if she could repeat where you go to find that.
Sure thing. If you go to our leeschools.net page, go to teaching and learning, and then on the left-hand side, go to curriculum.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, let me go first. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
I'll come
yeah.
back around for a second. So I will say that my oldest child is in 10th grade and my youngest is in 7th. So all 4 of my kids have taken civics. And I have taught 3rd grade civic standards in each of my children's classrooms because they invited me in when they were doing the 3 branches of government. So I've seen the standards embedded in the curriculum throughout their entire education. I do think that the public information piece is really lacking. I think, Ms. Acevedo, did I say your name correctly? Acevedo. I was close, sorry. I know that you're very fiery and awesome, but I don't know your last name. I think that one of those cool videos that we do highlighting our civics education might be wonderful for our community, because I believe what Ms. Morgan said and what Ms. Gittens said are absolutely true. The public doesn't understand what we're doing in our schools. So they hear the video of the 18-year-old kid, and they say, who's the Secretary of State? And he says Charlie Brown, and they assume that because they live in Lee County, Florida, we're not teaching it. They also think we're not saying the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of each day. We can only be at so many events where we answer these questions and impact so many people. And I will tell you that this isn't a problem that we can solve on our own. So my daughter took civics. You must know Miss Benham. She's at Veterans Park now, right?
Yeah.
She was my daughter's civics teacher, and she did Twitter or FaceTime or something. She did some kind of social media study sessions during dinner, and I remember this, and I remember talking about it from the table at the time. I remember it because it was during dinner. My kids are not allowed devices at the dinner table, and she was all upset, but Mom, it's for studying. I was like, all right, then that's good. Now, she was in those study sessions with 2 of her friends. Those 2 girls were at my house a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about civics. And I said, okay, what are your first rights? And they're like, your first rights? What are those? And I said, well, what are the rights contained in the First Amendment? They were like, the First Amendment, what's that? And I know for certain that they were taught that, and I know for certain that they passed the EOC, but those girls aren't necessarily talking about their first rights every night at the dinner table the way we are. So the fact that that we're teaching it doesn't mean the kids are going to retain it in a way that political groups want them to.
Right.
And I think that there's a way we can convey that to the public and let them know we're doing our duty, and that the public also has a responsibility in reinforcing this knowledge, either at home or through community groups. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. Ms. Morgan's
No,
first, and then I'll
you
come
said
back
it
to you.
all. That's where I was going. Thank you.
I mean, I was stunned. These girls are going to be voting in 2 years. In 2 years, they're going to be voting. And when I told them the first 5 rights, they said, are those our only rights? And I wanted to bang my head against a wall because I know they were in the same class. They were in the same study set. I know they learned it, and I know they passed the EOC. So we're doing our job. We just need some help. I'm sorry, Ms. Jordan.
I think what you said was really important too, because it is, what are they really hearing when they're sitting there? Because last night, I believe there was a young man who said that they do not have that in school. And that's what they wanted, that's what they were getting out of it, coming and being on the advisory committee, because he wants to learn about local and community government, because they don't teach them that. But I thank you for sharing that site too, because here and it shows us everything. That's good, thank you.
Ms. Fisher.
So yes, last night we had our introductory meeting for this year's Student Advisory Committee. And as the kids stood up and introduced themselves, and we had 60-some odd present, they unanimously said that they want to learn more about local government and the process and how it works and how it impacts them. So they really articulated that well, and that's an added bonus when kids get to participate in that, but that's a small percentage of kids, because we introduce them then to Robert's Rules of Order and the Sunshine Law, and so they had their first little practice session. So they'll be more keenly aware, but how they'll be able to share that with their peers is going to be difficult. So I think that the more information we can get out to the public, and the more we can reinforce those standards as we go through the K through 12 continuum, the better off we'll be, and the better informed citizens we'll have later. But I want to thank you for your efforts, and this is a great presentation. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Thank you. Well, I want to make sure it's turned on. Thank you very much. And, obviously one of the big takeaways here would be that I think what would help us as a district moving forward would be to put together something that would effectively communicate to our stakeholders all the things we are doing, the comprehensive nature of civics instruction in our district, and in a way that is consumable to every stakeholder. So we'll work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on 1 second, please, Ms. Gittens.
Question, as we're out in the community and people ask, and I'm not trying to volunteer you, but as Mr. Davis would say, voluntold, but if they do want further information as far as a speaker or whatever, are you on our speakers list to be able to speak to groups or organizations about what we do?
We're happy to serve you guys in any way we can to help our district.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay, next on the agenda is policy and process for joining the assistant principal and principal pools. Human Resources, Dr. Pruitt. We're spending a lot of time together today, Dr. Pruitt.
Oh, I'm very excited.
Happy birthday again, Dr. Pruitt.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So, just waiting on our computer here. Not sure what it's doing. Huh? Yes, it's thinking. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started, so we're not waiting here on the computer. The task this afternoon is to walk you through our current process for the, there we go, thank you, for the assistant principal pool and the principal pool process, and kind of walk you through the current process, some of the changes that have been made, some of the changes we're working on, and then provide the opportunity for you all to provide feedback. And we just wanted you to know that our current kindergartners will be retiring from the workforce in 2079. And I think it's understood that, you know, second to the teacher in the classroom, the school leadership is the most important thing in the schoolhouse. And so clearly this is a very important topic and one that definitely warrants, you know, having this conversation and talking things through. I will kind of provide the background for you that it was 2 years ago that we were able to excuse me, that we were able to add the position of Executive Director for Leadership Recruitment and Professional Development. That is the time that Human Resources took over the AP and Principal Pool process. In that transition, definitely some records and different things that were lost that, you know, we were not able to recreate. So I'm specifically going to be talking about from 2 years forward. I might be able to address any questions you have prior to that, but I may not be able to, so I just wanted to kind of say that up front. So currently, the assistant principal pool process opens up twice a year. I will say there was an exception to that. We did not open it in the spring of last year due to the fact that we were reducing assistant principals overall and felt it would be disingenuous to open that process when there was not going to be an opportunity for those folks to seek employment. So the process begins with, we put out an email to all instructional staff and invite them to come to an orientation where Ms. Harrell and I kind of go through the process of the pool and what it takes. We review what the minimum requirements are, and that is that they need to have completed either their degree in educational leadership or have met the certification requirements for educational leadership as defined by the state of Florida. They need to have passed the FELE exam. That's part of the process. And then have a recommendation from their administrator that they feel that they're, you know, ready to begin that process. So we go through that. Then they're invited to a writing assessment, which has evolved over the 2 years. And the first time we're trying a new thing this next round, where we're going to allow folks a window of time, but they can do that writing assessment from their home or from, you know, from their school if they want to stay after school, so that they don't have to physically come down here to do that, because we definitely, you know, in HR's quest for continuous improvement, that was one of the feedback we got about what if, you know, that I just can't make it, or, you know, I can't get down there. So that's why we've made that, that adjustment. If they're successful in the writing, then they're invited to come for their, in the interview, and also part of the writing assessment. This has also changed. We have them submit a resume, which is part of the process. We did that instead of the portfolio, because what we found is that most of our candidates had just finished doing a whole portfolio and doing all of that for their degree, and so kind of that was like recycling that. So what we felt was going to be more important is, you know, writing the resume and being able to express how it is that you are ready to take on that journey of becoming an assistant principal. And I will say also, through the writing assessment, the review of the resume, there is always opportunity for feedback and the communication that goes back. Ms. Harrell will meet with them individually and will provide that feedback as part of the process. So if they complete that writing assessment portion, then they're invited to come down for an interview. The interviews are panel interviews of sitting administrators, assistant principals, principals, and district staff that are invited to serve on these teams. We keep a record of that, because what we want to make sure is that it's not the same people every time. We also do our very best to make sure that we have representation from each zone and from each level, because of the fact that we may have an elementary person interviewing and we wouldn't want them to be in a room with just high school administrators who may not identify with what they're talking about. Again, same process. There is not a lot of times people say to me, well, what's that score they have to get? Well, what we do is we look at it from a mathematical lens. We kind of see where that average is, and then the extreme, like people on the low end are the ones that would not necessarily make it. We don't say you have to have a 3.0 average, because you may have a group of really hard graders and maybe nobody would get in, or real easy graders, everybody would get in. So we take, as I'm sure Mr. Savage thinks is wonderful, we take that mathematical approach and look at that, and then, you know, so many standard deviations away from the average, and those are the folks that are notified that they are in the assistant principal pool. And again, they're provided an opportunity. The emails that go out specifically states that they can get feedback if they would like to, and they can do that via phone. They can come in and sit with either Ms. Harrell and or myself and provide that feedback from what they heard, you know, from the panel. Because at the end of the day, we also have everybody come in and we sort of do a debrief, because it's always good to hear that and hear how the folks that participated feel that the process went. Once if you are, for example, if you are not successful in the writing assessment portion, the next time that the pool opens, you simply just apply again. Like, you don't have to go through all the credential checking again, because we've already done that. Same for the interview. If you've passed the writing assessment but not the interview, you don't have to go back and do the writing assessment again. And I say all this, and when you understand I talk about resources and level of service, there's a lot of documentation and a lot of tracking that goes on, which Ms. Harrell has done a lot to start to make that electronic, but we still have a way to go. So that's sort of the entry process relative to the assistant principal pool. So now what happens once you're in the pool? As positions are advertised, schools individually advertise those positions, and they are required at the school site to have an actual rubric by which they screen who they're going to select for an interview. And they are to keep that rubric, you know, and how they identified which folks they were going to interview. And we recommend, because remember, we're a decentralized hiring process in our district, so those are done at the school level with just oversight, you know, relative to, like, we tell you have to have a rubric, and then we tell you, you know, your interview questions have to be targeted selection / MBI motivation-based interviewing questions, and we go through the interviewing basics. They've been given that information and trained on that and what they need to do. We encourage them to do panel interviews where they have teachers and support staff and so forth, and parents on those teams. I can't tell you whether that's done with 100% fidelity. My guess is probably not in some cases, but I believe in most cases it is. Once the school has done their interviewing process, they email me their top 2 names, and those 2 candidates come in and they meet with me, Dr. Spiro, Ms. Harrell, and then the appropriate executive director by level. So if it's a middle school AP, then moving forward, it would be Linda Mayer that would be sitting in that. And then from that meeting, we, as a group, we talk to the principal and give our feedback, and really in most cases have said, you know, whichever is your choice, they're both good candidates, or, you know, we've provided our feedback or what have you. And then we ask the principal to notify all the candidates that somebody has been selected. I will say to you that that is an area of improvement with our schools. Sometimes aren't really good about following up with everybody that applied, and so we're working on that. And when it comes to the 2 finalists, we ask that they actually make contact with them. You know, don't just send an email that says, "Oh, sorry, you didn't," but actually have an actual conversation with them. That is our expectation. And then the school submits the name to Human Resources with a completed PAF. And then that name comes forward for school board approval. Once you become an assistant principal, you sort of get into this pipeline where you are put on a development plan. And through those experiences, there's 9 required courses There's 19 field experiences, things that we need you to accomplish as you're working. If you know, whether you're interested in becoming a principal or not, these are good professional development things that we are asking you to do through those experiences. We also have you go through the National Institute of School Leaders program, which is, I think I shared before, is about a 12 to 18-month program, which Ms. Harrell and I actually went through. We started right when she first took over because we felt if we were going to ask administrators to do it, we needed to know what it was and was it really worthwhile, and it's been some phenomenal stuff. And so that's sort of the development. They sort of work in cohorts, and this goes to some of the conversation that we've had recently about the principal pool. These folks kind of travel together because, for example, all the assistant principals that have been recently hired, they're going to start those 9 courses together. When they get to NISL, they'll be in that NISL group together, and they sort of move as a cohort group, kind of like they do when they're getting their graduate degrees. You know, you're in a cohort group of people and you travel together, which is really good because they get to build some really strong relationships and you know, get to know who to call if they have a question. One of the things that Ms. Harrell and I recognized is that while this is a great pipeline and a great process, it did not allow for assistant principals to be all together, which is how it used to be a couple years ago. So what we just are implementing for this year is we're having quarterly all assistant principal meetings. We actually just had the first one this week. And so we brought them all in as a group and just kind of had a welcome and introduction for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then we broke them off by level. So they had the opportunity to network, and our facilitative questions that we used to allow them to network was around restorative practices. What does that mean in your school? And we had some guiding questions, and there was just some awesome conversation that they had about, well, what are you doing in your school, and how are you doing that in your school? And so really some robust conversation. I was facilitating with the middle school group. Dr. Spiro was with, and Mr. Simmons were with the high school group, and Ms. Harrell and Dr. Carlin and Ms. Fletcher were with the elementary group. And so it was some really great conversation. Our next meeting, we're going to break by zone so that each zone assistant principals can talk about articulation and some other things, because their exit ticket for the meeting this week was, what do you want, you know, what are the topics that are going to help you be more successful in your job? And so we haven't had the opportunity yet to kind of go through those to see what those themes might be, but that will be our focus for the zone meeting. And then the next one will be level, and then the next one will be zone. So really allow them the opportunity to get with each other and to have those conversations. This is one of the proud things that Lynn and her team have accomplished, is getting that assistant principal development plan is all online now, so they can go in and just do it in PeopleSoft rather than this paper tracking, because that's part of the problem we had when we transitioned 2 years ago. Was I don't know how many months it was for her to figure out who's in what group and who's had this and how is, I mean, it was very, but now that we have this electronic, it doesn't matter who's here and who's handling it. It's all going to be captured in PeopleSoft, which we're so excited about. All right, so moving on to the principal pool assessment. So what happens is the, did you have a question?
No, we're keeping our questions to the
I know what our chair said, but I was just wondering if, before we went on to the next step, if we could at least pause.
I'd like to give this a try, and we'll move on next week.
Okay, so and we're almost to the end. So principal pool assessment is, again, our goal has been to have it open 2 times a year. I will tell you that this is the more trickier of the one because it involves actually principals assisting us. When we do the AP pool, we can use assistant principals, district administrators, but when we're doing the principal pool, it really requires us to have a whole bunch of principals that can be out for half a day or a day that can come down and assist us with this process. So it's a pretty big endeavor. So the once they have completed their required trainings, they've completed the NISL, the next step in the process is the assessment piece, and that's where they come in, and the components are ever evolving. But I would say generally, it's a human resources case study. We show them a video and say, okay, if you were the principal, what are the steps you would take to address this human resources component? A teaching, coaching conversation, we show them a teacher teaching, and then we have somebody from professional development that pretends they're that teacher, and we have that person give actual coaching feedback right on the spot. And sometimes there's a data presentation where they'll share some piece of data at their school. We use what's called motivation-based interviewing questions throughout the process as part of like a follow-up. So like we do the coaching, then we ask them to talk, and then we'll ask them questions to follow it up. And then from there, the same scoring applies, that we kind of look at it and give that, or how many, are you so many standard deviations, away from what the median is. And then same process, you're given notification and then asked if you're looking for feedback. And I mean, I would, for the most part, people do follow up on that and ask for specific feedback. And we have, in a lot of cases, once we've provided the feedback, have seen, some really positive improvements going forward. And then once you become a principal, there are monthly principal meetings, like we had this week, and you've heard about the principal lead and the structure of that. So that's, one way that when you first become a principal, you have some support structure there. Ms. Harrell and I run a new principal support group. So, and we do that separately. So last year, and that group of principals actually requested they want to continue to meet with us on a monthly basis because they found it of such value. So, and then we just had a meeting with the whole crop of new principals, and really we focus it around what does support look like to you, and how can we best assist you in supporting you and moving forward. And so we're looking forward to working with our second full group of that. We do the Summer Leadership Institute, where we focus that. This will be our third year as a team, I think, doing that. And then there is lots of other optional training opportunities. We have lots of folks that have become NISL facilitators. We implemented the crucial conversations and getting things done. The Lean Six Sigma. We are just going to be rolling out crucial accountability, will be coming soon. And so, again, providing additional professional development opportunities for those folks that are sitting principals. And the monthly principal meetings are really focused on professional development and not on, we're going to talk at you and read a PowerPoint to you. That it really is interactive work, really powerful. It was yesterday, that meeting that we had. And with all of this, I just want to throw this piece out there. We, as again, part of the whole continuous improvement, we always do follow-up surveys, and we take that data and we look at it, and it helps us refine how we do our meetings moving forward, so that, again, we're getting, is this working for you, is it not? And really has caused us to, make some changes in how we're doing some things. So, we're very excited about that. Some of the things that we're looking at for the future is continued electronic enhancements, ways that we can continue to capture things in PeopleSoft. I think will be really, really helpful. We have been and it's ongoing, but we're continuing to refine and redevelop our leadership talent acquisition and development manual. That's kind of the document that encompasses all of this information that I'm sharing with you. Continuing to utilize the continuous improvement process by utilizing our skills, project management and Lean Six Sigma skills. One thing that we're looking to implement starting in January is to resurrect the Future Leaders / Leading Edge program. And that is a program that was run, I know that I went through it, and I think, I know Ms. Harrell did. I don't know if I think Dr. Spiro did. And that's where, if you're a teacher that's not sure if you might want to get into leadership, you start, it's anywhere from an 8 to 12 week program, and it's done in the evenings, and it has like a portfolio of things to do, but it basically shows you this is the kind of the life of a school leader, so you can kind of identify if this is a path that you might want to take. And it's voluntary, and you do get professional development points for it, But we were lucky that Mr. McCullers left all his, you know how good he was with all his notes and everything. So we have all of that information. So we're really excited. Another thing that I didn't put on here is that we are in the process of fine-tuning an MOU with Florida Gulf Coast University, where they're going to take the parts and pieces of our assistant principal pool, and they're going to include them in their ed leadership degrees. And so if you graduate from FGCU with an ed leadership degree, you automatically get into the assistant principal pool, and you do not have to go through our process, because the MOU says, you know, that you commit to doing all these things as part of the degree program, and we're going to do that collaboratively. And so we're excited about that also. And that's kind of my overview, and so now I'll open it up to questions.
Okay, I wanted to start with a few questions with the AP
Yep.
pool. I guess when they submit their proof of the ed leadership degree, they also, you have their transcripts. Do grades count? You didn't mention.
No, no, we're
is
just
that?
looking for, we vet just like when we're going to hire a teacher. In other words, they apply to the pool. Our analysts, our staffing and talent management analysts, they vet them just like they would vetting a teacher, and there's check boxes. Yes, they've passed the FELE. Yes, they have a degree. Yes, they've applied for certification, and it's,
But, okay, so the
Yep.
grades aren't, now, being a former English teacher and knowing about these things, the writing assessment, you said now is not done, like, you have an hour or whatever.
no, there's a time frame. You just don't have to come down here to do it.
Who's monitoring
Who's,
that the person is actually doing it all himself or herself without
no
somebody
one.
editing?
No one will be.
Okay. I guess just on the honor system,
Yep.
on that, I'll be interested.
Like I said, this is the first time we're trying it this way, so we'll see.
How many, and are they handwritten, or they're,
They'll be emailed the information in the prompt, and they'll be given a 2-hour window to complete that and email it back. And I guess, you know, part of it is in this,
down in that 2-hour?
yes, right.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
all right, so that's,
Yeah. So I guess in theory, you know, could they have somebody come to their house or whatever and sit down and do it? But, you know, we're more thinking.
go to the web and
Right.
what are,
Well, but let's think in real life, like if I'm going to go write something, I have the web at my disposal. I can go, you know, put stuff in, and now is it possible that we could, and I'm sure we could do this easy enough. I mean, we could put it through Grammarly or something like that and make sure that it's not. We can do that. That would be easy to do to make sure it's not copyrighted. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, and I'm speaking for English teachers
ma'am.
now, we're pretty picky, but over the years, and I'm not just talking about Lee County, when we've had assistant principals send us to the school some emails that are fraught with grammatical errors, and it's just, yeah, you
Ma'am.
understand what I'm
Yes, ma'am,
what
I
I'm
do. Mm-hmm.
saying, and I've seen it throughout, and so that's a consideration. I'll ask my other things later.
Okay.
Ms. Gittens?
Okay, I have a couple of questions and a suggestion.
Sure.
The notification process, and I hear all the time that people don't hear back. The process when they apply to interview for a position, and I believe there's a generic kind of through PeopleSoft that it was received or whatever. But the suggestion might be, and you did mention that some schools are better at that than others, is to have like a cover check sheet that says, you know, you did this for the schools that are handling the interviews. And part of that checklist would be, have you notified everyone that was on your list?
Yeah. We
I know you try. I know you try.
yeah, because I am passionate about that, because it really leaves a bad taste in the mouth if you don't hear that. And we are continuing to investigate if there's a way, like at the district level, we can somehow kick it off, but we just haven't quite gotten there yet. But that's been one of the things I've been asking for, not just on assistant principal, because on teaching positions or on custodial, it leaves a bad taste. If you don't hear back, then it makes the school district of Lee County look like we don't care, and that's not
Next time
true.
you hear anything about it is in a board meeting.
Right.
So-and-so is announced.
Exactly, right.
It does leave a bad taste.
Yes.
Okay, you mentioned that in the school level, it's decentralized, and they basically do their interviews in their school. But oftentimes, there are district personnel that sit on their interview panels. How do you decide which schools and who and why district personnel would be involved in their
The principal does the inviting. There are principals that may want, like if they're a new principal, sometimes they'll invite a fellow principal that they trust, like maybe their former principal, to sit in. Or I know of cases, if they need an assistant principal that's really strong with ESOL strategies, they might invite somebody from ESOL to come sit in. But the district doesn't do that. That is done by the principal does the inviting if that's happening.
Okay, and you did say, you talked about the quarterly AP meetings, and my question is, if someone is in the AP pool and they're successful to move to the principal pool, okay, but at the same time, they're still working as an AP, do they attend both meetings or just one? Is that clear, or you need me to clarify?
I think, but so when you are a sitting AP, but you're in the principal pool.
Right, you have
You're in a
successfully-
separate training group, and you still go to those meetings, but then you also come to the whole group assistant principal meeting.
Right, but do you go to the principal meetings?
No.
Okay, so you don't go there until you're actually
So
a
you're-
principal?
Right. Now, assistant principals attend if their principal is not able to be there, or in some cases, the K through 8s might send an assistant principal so that they can have one person with the middle school and one person with the elementary. But as a general rule, it's just the principals.
Okay, and the last thing is, you mentioned an MOU with FGCU. A lot of individuals get their degrees through NOVA. Right, Dr. Atkins? And so is there any thought about doing a similar thing with them?
We're open to anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I know personally, when I went through NOVA, one of the reasons was that there was, Dr. Atkins and other people that were from the district.
Right.
And the impression is then that you will learn more about
Right.
this particular district.
Yeah, my specialist is from Nova, so I know, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you.
Right.
Yep.
So, just a thought.
Well, and just, yeah, one of the things about that I think is kind of unique, just to kind of piggyback on what the chair was mentioning. Yeah, you do have a lot of people that are currently, working in those particular positions that do work at those types of, those universities, which are a little bit different than what we might see at FGCU. FGCU typically has longer-term faculty that work specifically at FGCU, so,
Except they are having sitting staff be adjuncts, and that's part of the deal, is that they work with us, and it's collaborative in nature so that we're more involved in what they're doing, because they want it to be more real, because they believe that will make them more competitive.
That's good to hear. I mean, that's, because that's one of the things that we struggled with a little bit with knowledge about, local process and procedures, or even kind of up-to-date stuff, on how to budget, and, that, and I've adjunct there as well, so sometimes we, traveling professors, but not as much as what you might get at
Right.
Nova.
And one last thing too, in your collaboration with FGCU or NOVA or whomever, one of the critical pieces that I found going through the program was the infusion of the Feely information. And I'm sure you've seen this too. Individuals that do like the online course or whatever don't have the opportunity.
Yeah, we definitely, we see a difference.
Because
whole
everything we learned
process.
is like,
Yeah.
okay, this is going to be on the
Yeah.
Feely.
Yeah.
And other institutions don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the situation with people not being able to pass the Feely.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fisher, did you have any?
Yes, I did, a little bit. So in addition to the resume, the writing assessment might consist of what? Like what kind of?
It might be writing a memo to your parents about your FSA data, or writing a memo about, you know, you had a fire in your first grade classroom, and you know what I mean, like some kind of communication that would go out to a stakeholder group.
Right, okay. And so I think I heard you say that when candidates are successful and they've made it into the pool, they're notified and they get feedback. If they are not successful and don't get into the pool, are they also notified?
It's sent at the same time.
Okay, it's at
Yep.
the same time, okay. At that time, when they're notified, is there any open door, like, you know, if you want to try again, or here are some of the things you need to work on?
Yes, absolutely. And then we automatically, like, include them in the next round, and to say, you know, if you would like to try again or what have you, then we do that.
And then regarding the professional development, what are the 9 courses that are mandatory, and that's over and above the ed leadership degree? Are they actually college courses, or are they some other?
No, there are district courses.
Oh,
I'm looking here. So, Frisk training, Hire in the Lee County Way, teacher evaluation and feedback, employment law, budget and insurance and benefits, safety and security, leadership considerations for all means all, diversity and inclusion, school culture and teacher retention.
oh, okay, awesome, that's fine. So now, I guess I have one other thing. The optional courses.
Yes.
I know that 2 of them, things that are listed are literally books. So is there, how is that delivered, or how, is it a book study, or is it?
No, it's an actual, Ms. Harrell and I actually are certified trainers for the work.
Okay.
And there's an actual workbook, and you come in for the training, and you get the book as part of the training.
Right.
But it involves a lot of practicing of the skills, because that reading a book doesn't really give you the practice time, and so the training does include a lot of the practice and then coaching about the practice that we see. And so, and we're going to continue to roll that out. I know we're over several hundred administrators that have been trained, but there's still more out there to be trained. And then we're going to hopefully continue to roll it out to other work levels as we continue to work through it.
And that's probably a good idea. I was wondering, because it's optional, like what percentage of people take advantage of that option?
So like I said, of our 380 administrators, I want to say we've trained optional in the 1 year, we were over 60%.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So that's good. Yeah, I was looking at-
I will say, getting back to this afternoon's conversation, I mean, it is possible that it is put in a principal improvement plan, and it's not optional.
Okay. That's good also. So then, of those 4 listed options, including NISL, which is the most popular? Do you?
Of the optional ones, I would say Crucial Conversations right now is the most popular. However, word's gotten out about GTD, so we've been having a lot of requests for that. And then we're going to be starting Crucial Accountability to the folks who've already had Crucial Conversations, so I don't know yet what popularity that will gain. We won't know till we start to do it.
Okay. Yeah, and I was looking at some of the GTD videos. It was interesting.
Yep, yep.
I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ivanelli, questions, comments? Ms. Jordan?
No, I think they've asked them all. Thanks.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you're continuously updating the process, and you mentioned one of the things that's new is writing assessment. So do you go to the people who were in the pool already and didn't have to do a writing assessment and ask them to do a writing assessment?
Say that again. I don't understand your question.
You are taking people into the pool, and now those people coming in have to complete a writing assessment, but they're all...
Everybody's always had a writing assessment. What
okay.
we've
My
changed is that you don't have to come physically to this building to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then my second question is, you talked about different people, different groups of people doing the interviewing. So how do you maintain consistency of the interview process and outcome if you're using different groups of people for each interview? Do you have
We train
a series
them
of questions or rubric?
Yes, and then we do a training before we start the interviews and go through it, and this is kind of how it works. And generally, there's a lead in each group, and because we always can't have all new people every time, we have the person who's done it before kind of be the lead for that room.
Okay. Now, what about people who have been in the pool for some time? Do you say, let's say at a 5-year mark, let's have a critical conversation about the fact that you've been in the pool for 5 years and nobody's picked up your option?
We're working on that. And you might recall that Chair Gittens was asking about dates when people get into the pool. We don't have that for everyone, and so we're so the short answer is yes, we're talking about what are we going to do about those folks, and right now we're talking about a reapplication period after 5 years, but I will say to you that that's still kind of under discussion about how, if we can't for sure figure out that they've been in there we got to be careful there, because I don't want to tell someone who hasn't been in there 5 years because we don't know their date. And we're trying to recreate that. We have a separate database that we're continuing to work on that is going to capture when they got into the pool, their race, because we get asked a lot, like how many minorities are in the principal pool. So we're capturing that. We're capturing their certifications. So we're trying to keep this separate, comprehensive database on all of these folks, where I think we can fine tune that as we move forward.
Okay. There was a period of time when we had a lot of principals and APs appointed where there was no professional development for them, either while they were in the pool or after they were appointed. And so I guess my question is, now that we have all of these learning opportunities for people in pools and for people who are new, how do you offer those opportunities to people who are actually practicing? Because there are some principals who never experienced, in my opinion, real professional development and would benefit.
Right. So one of the ways is through the optional, inviting them to those. But we have had a lot of, and I don't have the exact data, but we've had a lot of sitting principals that have come through the NISL program, which really has been, I know that if I were still a principal, that training would have been, like, I would have loved to have had that when I was a building principal. It's very comprehensive, and all the components of it that really kind of, it's just a great foundation, whether you're a brand new principal or a, 20-year principal, and I would say that is the biggest way. But then probably most importantly is the change in the focus of the principal meetings and the training that occurs in those principal meetings. And so we'd prefer to refer to it as principal professional development meetings rather than principal meetings, because it really is professional development focused.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any first round comments. Ms. Vaughn, did you have more questions or comments?
Yeah, I did. So in the AP pool, when we get to next steps, my understanding then is that basically the school can already rest assured that everybody has qualified and.
Yes.
Okay. Are the schools allowed to go back and take a look at the resumes or?
Well, the candidates are required to, as part of the application process, to upload a current resume.
Okay.
The resume, again, if they've been in the pool a year or 2 or 3.
Changed
Right.
significantly. So they
Because
would-
one of the things that we do when we're talking to, when we talk to people about this whole assistant principal pool process, is in that orientation meeting, we talk a lot about, here's the experiences, here's the things, be the master of your experience, because some principals are better at providing opportunities for their assistant principals than others. So we tell them, you need to take charge of that. And if you don't have experience doing budgets, then get with your principal and say, I want some experiences on how to do this. So we really talk them through that. So they also hopefully are updating their resume. And so that would be my hope anyway.
Okay, and then kind of backing up to the process. So in other words, the pool opens and they do the applications are reviewed, the writing assessment, interviews, et cetera. If let's say that the interviews don't go well, they don't have another opportunity during that open window. They would have to wait for the next
open window.
open window.
Right. And part of that is resources.
Right.
Level
No,
of
no.
service,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they need to wait.
Right.
Until the
Yep.
next, which opens this door or
Sure.
window to what we talked about last week
Mm-hmm.
with the idea of perhaps having a standardized, and
Right.
I remember what you said when
Yep.
I asked about that, but it just seems a lot more fair to do that.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. I don't, like I said, I mean, it's always been our goal to have that set time in the fall and that set time in the spring. And we have really good intentions about that. And it just, but I hear you, and I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, it's just, if you want to
Yep.
learn lessons from a week ago, one lesson is there's a lot of controversy, there's a lot of hurt feelings, and people feeling demoralized when whether it's real or their perception.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's still going to make people upset when it looks like a pool has opened for X number of individuals.
Right.
So I don't know what we can do. I'm hoping that moving forward as a board, we can do whatever is needed for HR to remedy that situation so that we have a much more fair process to people who are planning ahead and getting some of these things done. Because I understand if they move as cohorts.
Right.
But there's certain smaller things that they need
Well,
to be.
and part of why we've had that process document that allows for that, for those circumstances, is because if we only have that assessment on one day in the fall, I mean, what if you're in the hospital? What if you're on your way to the district and you get into a car accident, or what, you know what I mean? And so,
I'm not saying one day,
no, but I'm saying, but that's how it is right now. If you don't, you know what I mean? If you miss that one day, let's say that those assessments are being done, then yeah, then you're waiting all the way till the spring before it become, yeah.
and sometimes it's a life lesson.
Right.
That don't procrastinate, get it done. I'm
No,
serious,
yeah.
though. I used
I understand.
to teach that
Yeah.
to my kiddos with research paper.
Yep.
Unless you're in the hospital, that research paper is in my
Due,
room
yeah.
on the due date,
Yeah.
just as a life lesson to meet deadlines.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is I'm hoping that as a board, we can move forward to help HR with the lack of resources to get this done. I don't know, may we ask what?
I don't know what you're asking.
Well, I'm about to say it. May we ask our colleagues here if any of them feel like there should be a set open-close time as a policy, because we don't have that in policy moving forward?
Should
We
the
can,
superintendent weigh in on that?
yeah, can you weigh in on that? I think I'm hearing you don't have the resources. Isn't this going to be a budget thing?
Well, I'm saying,
I'm asking Dr. Pruitt,
Yeah, but
is
you
this a
didn't hear
budget
what I
issue
said.
for next year?
Well, it's all about, I think there's a larger discussion that we would need to have with the cabinet and Dr. Atkins about priorities and where is the best use of the resources and looking at the bigger picture. I mean, yes, it'd be great if I would say, yeah, give me one for this and give me one for this, but I think you have to look, and it's not just HR, it's what does operations need? Because if you were to ask me today, yes, a resource would be helpful, but I would tell you I'd rather that resource go to transportation and let them get some assistance in their offices. You know what I mean? Like, if you're looking at a district priority, I think that would be more important to me than that's just my opinion.
Dr. Atkins, you want to weigh in? I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, similar to really what she says, I believe that we all want to avoid situations where I'm trying to recommend somebody who falls outside the principal pool process. That's what we're trying to avoid there, and I think all of us understand the reason for that. So as a result of that, we as a team have gone back and are not only re-examining our process, as it relates to the principal pool, but also re-examining our process in terms of getting school-based input and making things that were what we consider best practice really standard practice. So, and again, when it comes to one of the things that we can do, even within human resources, is what are the priorities within that division? Because there's a lot of things that they do, and and the priorities have been in different areas, so we could readjust what those priorities are. So I would like to be able to do that, but I think that the commitment of this board to having an open and equitable process as it relates to the principal pools and having an open during periods of time that people can count on is something you've expressed, and I don't, I think all of us would support that. If I were in their position as an assistant principal wanting to become a principal, I would be pretty frustrated if I couldn't get an opportunity to take a shot at a job that was, kind of my dream job because the pool wasn't open to me at that time. And some of these people, it takes a while to get through, because they have to complete all these requirements. And I will tell you personally, I was in a situation where, an assistant principal job, opened up, and there was a little bit of latitude given to me to even complete those requirements. So I get it, but I will be happy to look at that and bring back a recommendation. But again, with our budget, I would ask the board to allow us to weigh all of those options, because she's absolutely right. I mean, there's some priorities such as transportation and areas in operations that are really critical right now that we want to focus on.
Do you feel like that satisfies your
Well,
request?
I was kind of cut short on what I was saying. I'm talking about moving forward in looking at this. I didn't imagine that it would occur overnight, but to at least be working on it and working on, maybe some smaller steps. And that's what I was trying to see, if fellow board members felt that way or if it was just me. I just wanted to kind of get a feel.
And what
Just
he said satisfy you?
I wanted to hear what my fellow board members say as well. I
Well,
did
actually, Kathleen
listen.
has her hand up.
I know, and Gwen had her hand up first. I'm trying to keep this to individual board member comments, 2 rounds of them.
This
That's
is
gonna
round
turn
2
this-
for me. I'm
It's going to
done.
turn this into a workshop if I poll all of the board members. So my question is, you asked for an extension of the process or a review of the process. Dr. Atkins has indicated that he will undertake that review of the process. I'm thinking a workshop for board member comment at that time, when he brings it forward to us, is a more appropriate time for discussion amongst board members. Does that satisfy your desire?
Whatever you decide, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Gittens. Wait a minute, were you done with your comments?
I'm done,
Ms.
yes.
Gittens.
I'm just going to ask Ms. Morgan, was your comment about this situation? Because I'm shifting gears a
Yeah.
little bit.
So I was just going to say, Dr. Atkins' response is exactly the response one would expect, given a governance team listening to staffers talk about a process. We've asked the questions about the process. They've had the opportunity to reflect on it. They may refresh it and come back. That is our job. And our job is not to tell her how to do her job or to write something into policy about it. It is to bring to light those things that concern us so that staff can take appropriate steps to address them and provide us some assurance that they've heard us and are moving forward. And that's, to me, that's the end of our involvement.
Ms. Gittens.
Okay, shifting gears just a little bit. You mentioned the process of principals mentoring people in their building, which is basically what happens. But we all know that many times that's someone either they know or, have a connection with in some way. And I think we end up missing people that don't have that connection with that principal in that building, so therefore they miss the opportunity. So
I would agree.
My suggestion is, for one, in the professional development with the principals, to really emphasize how important it is to be global in your selection and help of everyone in the building that is interested in doing those types of things, and just make it equitable across the board. But sometimes that's still not going to happen. So is there a mentor, like maybe a list of other principals that would be willing to take on someone, a mentor? I know.
Yeah, we do, and this is one of those things that we're still continuing to look at and refine, but we do have in the summer where we send out who would love to have an intern, and we have them come either to the district office or they go out and run a summer school program, because it is hard to do during the school year. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there are just situations where people, just due to the nature or whatever, may not have what they need in the building to get that. And so that's the one way we do from the district level, is to do that and provide them those opportunities. We get a list of who would like an intern and who's willing to take on that role. And then we ask people who are interested, that are, like, let's say in the AP pool, who wants to do an internship. So we have tried that. I think we could probably look at that and maybe expand it somehow. I don't know.
Well, and I know, like, in the zones, it might be a little bit easier.
Right.
I know people that are, work at one school that's close to another school, and the principal says, yeah, come on by. If you
Yep.
work at a high school and you're done at 1:30,
Yep.
you can go to the middle school and you got a couple of hours to learn what's going on there. And it may even pique your interest to decide which level you want to work.
Sure, absolutely. No, that's a very good point.
Are you completed? Ms. Fisher, any second round comments?
No, thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
I just had a couple questions, like, because you were talking about resources, so what does that entail exactly? What is it you would need to be able to?
So, if you're gonna, for example, if someone's gonna set up and expand a mentoring program, right? Someone needs to do that work, like contact principals, who'd be interested, then follow up, who wants to participate, and so there's the management of all that. If we were gonna do the pool process, let's say if you just missed the interview part, if we were just gonna redo that for, like, people need it the second time, if we're gonna run that again, somebody needs to run it. Somebody needs to, get the volunteers to come do it and contact the teachers and prepare all the materials. And, it's just all of that. It's not only the management of it, but then it's the kind of the day-to-day making it happen. Somebody's got to make the copies for it. Somebody's got, you know what I mean? It's just, so when I say that, it's, we hire so many people, we do so much human resources transactions that it's about balancing all of that. And that's why currently it's mostly manageable. Ms. Harrell might disagree with me, but it's mostly manageable to do it AP twice a year, principal twice a year. But if you do it any more than that, I mean, but you've also got to balance, then you're also you got to have the volunteers that are willing to do it. So you have to have the principals and assistant principals that are also willing to take the day out of their schedule to come in and do it. So that's part of it as well. So it's kind of all of those things and just sort of managing all the moving pieces it takes to make that happen.
So that would be my other question then. So best practices, I mean, that's what you're telling me, that, or is there a possibility that what other districts might do with their pool, you know, what their process is with their pools if they're open at a certain time, you know, twice a year, or, you know, just curious.
Yeah, we've done some looking at that, and as we find, I guess it's a good thing we find, is that we talk to people and they say, oh my gosh, that's what you do? Can you send us that? It's very hard for us to find districts that are doing more than we are, or doing it in a more expeditious way. We just, for what, you know, and I like to attribute it to that it's just outstanding, you know, staff that really just makes it happen and continues to improve, and the collaboration, you know, with my other divisions that help make it happen. But yeah, I mean, we're always looking for what are other people doing. I mean, that's how you find some of your best stuff, is by talking to other people. I know in this last year when I was part of Leadership Florida Education, and I would talk to school districts about some of the stuff we were doing, and they were just like, oh, you're kidding me, you know what I mean? So, which, like I said, it's a compliment, but it's.
Well, I just will say this. One of the reasons why I had joined when I was in Human Resources Society for Human Resource Management, and why I know that Dr. Pruitt and her team are so active in that particular organization, is that, you know, you look at the state in terms of examples, and in many times in terms of process and procedures that relates to human resources or bargaining, you're not going to find the degree of sophistication that you're going to find in what she's doing in human resources. You have to go outside many times, and that's why I think being a part of that national organization, which I think is that organization is world-class, SHRM. You know, being a part of that and really learning from that and bringing that back to Lee County, you know, I think is probably more valuable. I know that, you know, when I was a part of some of the organizations like, you know, FIN, which is Florida's Educational Negotiators, you know, what we do in terms of bargaining and negotiations and grievance and all that stuff is far and ahead of what you find most. There are significant differences in between large school districts and what some of the smaller rural districts do, and this, I think, gets to her point about you go out there and find a better process. It's more difficult than one might think.
But we're always looking.
Well, and back to what you were saying, you know, earlier about shared responsibility, or shared, you know, the principals or the APs or the teachers that want to be APs and want to get in that pool, they have a shared responsibility.
Yes.
It's their destiny. So I think that, you know, if it's just twice a year, I mean, we have these guidelines, we need to, you know, follow them and not, you know, and stick with our own policies and procedures and not individualize the process. That's all I have. Thank you.
I just have one quick thing. When it says that you advertise, the schools advertise the positions, that's on our website, is where the advertise?
Yeah, it's right the same place that the teaching positions and support staff positions and those are located. And then we, in any of the positions that we have, there's supposed to be, and I say that because I don't know, for whatever reason, sometimes there's a glitch, but we send an email out to the people that are actually in the pools about the positions and say it's being advertised. And we do that because not everybody's looking every week at the employment opportunity, so they may not know that, oh gosh, this job is available.
Well, I think that's great then. So they get the first heads up prior to it going.
It's usually simultaneous or, around when it opens. It could be a day or two later or what have you, yes.
And then when it says anticipated on like the website, does that mean there's somebody in the wings?
So, for example, at Monday's board meeting, for your consideration is Linda Mayer to become the executive. You have not approved that yet. So I can only advertise her job as anticipated, because if for some reason she does not move forward, I don't have a position there. So that's why we would say anticipated. A lot of times it's because whatever that employment action that's supposed to happen hasn't happened yet, but we also don't want to wait, because then I lose a week or two if I don't start to advertise it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so my only comment really doesn't have anything to do with the pool, except you mentioned Linda Mayer, and having read her resume and knowing her as a human being, and sort of tying in what we talked about this morning at the workshop with collaborative leadership and making sure that we're creating a district that embraces collaborative leadership. Putting her in charge of middle schools will certainly go a long way toward that. And she was my daughter's principal, her 6th grade year, and I was devastated.
At Bonita,
First year
yeah.
on the board, Dr. Adkins moved her out of my daughter's school to Harns Marsh, but it was the right thing to
Yeah.
do, because she put a culture in place at Bonita Middle that has survived her departure. So I'm just super excited that
Yep.
she's coming.
Thank you for that.
Well, I think you got to see firsthand the culture that was put in place at Harns Marsh by that same individual, so.
Yeah, she's outstanding. Very good, thank you very much. New agenda item, that's probably Attorney Williams. Not only is it online, but I've been handed this delightful piece of paper.
He has his jacket off, he's ready.
I think we're going to attempt to get it on the screen.
Sorry, I didn't know you were using it. I let it turn it off.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Get a hard copy. Get a hard copy. The hard copies.
Pulling that up, thank you for your quick response, Attorney Williams and Ms. Schaefer. Thank you for your quick response to our request for this.
Vice Chair.
I'm sorry, the changes in red are
That's this morning.
Mr. Bierman's changes now from the one earlier?
The changes in red are, let's see, is this the most recent one? The changes in red were, I believe, made by Mr. Williams, but in collaboration with Mr. Bierman.
Last night, yeah.
And I also helped just a little.
Okay.
It also reflects the changes that were discussed this morning.
Yep.
Yes.
Vice Chair? Madam Vice Chair? Or Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, I'm reading what was sent to us, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just, I know we discussed it briefly at the workshop, but in order to amend the agenda, I would recommend entertaining a motion from the board to add this so you can discuss it.
Okay. Is there a motion to amend? Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I would like some time, quiet time to read this before we have our presentation.
No worries.
Well, can we take the vote, and then I'll call for recess?
That was the discussion.
Any other discussion?
Ms. Fisher, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now, I'd like to propose a 5-minute recess. 5-minute recess to go over the changes.
Okay.
Thank you.
from the school board attorney and just some considerations in looking at other job descriptions. These changes were incorporated into the job description for now the chief legal counsel, as an update to the former general counsel. Again, if you look at the highlighted red areas, the focus was to make this position and clearly define that the role would be reporting to the superintendent, but also that the role would be advising the school district and the superintendent and not the school board. The role is made to manage the legal counsel office, and I actually clarified that. I said legal services before. It's actually the job, the office location is legal counsel office, so I made that correction as well. There were some changes to the minimum qualifications. There had been some concerns expressed about the attorney being barred in federal court, and so I added the admission into the United States Federal Court in the Middle District, which is the court that governs our county, as well as the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Added a provision including 10 years of progressive responsibility and work experience in the field of law. Basically because you're going to want someone with at least 10 years experience of progressive experience going up. Again, just increase the levels of experience to ensure that the board feels comfortable with the level of experience of the attorney that fits in this role. And then moving on to page 2, again, just making consistent advise the superintendent and school district staff, made the changes to Ms. Board Member Vaughn's paragraph bullet point, assign and monitor all work of in-house attorneys in the legal counsel office. The next provision that's highlighted was actually added by the school board attorney or at their suggestion with respect to meetings. I know historically the staff attorney had sat in for the school board attorney when they couldn't be present as the parliamentarian. And I want to make that clear that that's simply as the parliamentarian, which is to guide the meetings. We went over this at the student advisory. I think there's a distinction between parliamentarian and then actually providing legal advice to you. That's not the goal of this position unless allowed for. I know there's the mention of as needed for quasi-judicial hearings, and again, I don't know if Chris wants to comment on that, because again, that was a recommendation from them. I think there's going to always be collaboration between the chief legal counsel and the school board attorney. I think there will always be the option of the board going to the superintendent for a opinion from the chief legal counsel, but I want to make it very clear in this job description that, again, the role of the school board attorney is to advise the board.
If I will just real quickly dovetail off of that. So, you know, the intent of adding that provision was actually with a brief, after a brief discussion with staff and the consideration that, in the event that there is some sort of emergency, or, in the event that you end up with a school board attorney that is an individual, or if it's me on my way up here and I'm in a car accident or something happens, we want to make sure that there is somebody to be able to serve you, at your meetings. And so that the intent is really just to make sure that there is somebody, in the event of the absence of a school board attorney, to be able to fill that role. That's the only goal here. So.
Ms. Gittens?
First of all, thank you. You do speedy work, you guys over there. We appreciate that. The only thing I might say, and it kind of goes along with what Chris was just saying, on the third page, the second bullet is coordinate with school board attorney regarding legal matters related to school board and district. Honestly, I believe that's important enough to move it to page 2 under the first bullet that says advise the superintendent and school district staff on all legal matters, because that's, or somewhere on that first page, or possibly near in the absence of the school board, but it's important and kind of tucked in the back.
No, I absolutely agree. I added it because we actually came up, that was a collaborative
Just to add.
because we do it, and I wanted to be very clear that that's something that both offices do so that we reach,
Very
you know,
important, yeah.
consensus
So
on
I just
issues.
think it should be a higher priority on your list is all.
Ironically, this reminds me of last night's Student Advisory Committee where they voted to move something on the page. We debated, by the way.
Yeah, I don't want to be too redundant, but yes, you know, what we wanted to make sure that we encapsulated in the job description was that sometimes it is necessary for there to be coordination between the school board attorney's office and chief legal counsel. Now, while you may, you know, your school board attorney is your attorney for, you know, to serve at your pleasure.
has to be.
You know, if there's a policies that come through for your approval will require coordination. As Brian had said earlier in the day, sometimes when you're dealing with contracts, it's got to be something that has to be collaborative. And so we wanted to make sure that going forward that that's not something that you have to deal with or that the office has to deal with in terms of confusion about what that role actually is and whether or not they actually have that authority to do it. So.
That's all I have.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, on page 3, that third bullet point, and obviously that wasn't changed, but I just noticed something about this. To whom are the quarterly reports given? To the superintendent, who would then,
Provided to the board.
okay.
Yeah, if requested. And yeah, the goal, one of the things that I know I personally wanted to do, and used to happen when in my former district, is that the attorney's office provided a kind of an annual report, just kind of letting you know presentations given, lawsuits, issues, just so that you had a general understanding of what the office actually does, or a better understanding, I'll say it that way. And so that would be the goal, is to keep you more advised and be more transparent about what the legal office is working on, especially as we grow, because, you know, not that we need to justify it, because I think it's pretty obvious that the services are needed, but just so that the board and the community, for that matter, are advised as to what we actually do.
Any comments or questions? Ms. Fisher, did you have anything here?
No, I just thank you very much. This is very helpful.
You're
Ms.
welcome.
Giovanelli?
No, good, I'm good.
Thank you.
Ms. Morgan?
I'm good.
This isn't really a question for you. This might be a question for Dr. Pruitt, or maybe Dr. Atkins can answer. I never viewed job descriptions and essential job functions as being, one being more important than the other. They're not numbered, they're bullet pointed. So am I supposed to read a job description such that the first item is the most important and anything below it is subordinate to that? They're all equally important? Okay. You brought up an issue that I didn't even, I was like, oh my gosh, am I reading these the wrong way? Have I been reading them the wrong way all these years?
I don't think, it's not numbered like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To me, it's just like, as you're looking at it, a higher priority on the list is the first one, for some reason. I mean.
A study
that's just
somewhere
me.
that says people stop reading after the 4th bullet. So
Yes.
just
Well, yes.
so that we ensure that
Page
that
3, they
is
stop
clearly
reading
defined.
After page 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't reading them incorrectly. Anybody else have any comments or suggestions?
Just
Please.
Just a couple things. One is, the chair had reminded me, we were scheduling something in the very near future, it may already be on the calendar, regarding litigation, and which was mentioned here, so that's something that was already requested, and I think we're working on a date if we don't have it already. I'm looking at Jen, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Just,
I think we do.
I think we've got some things on the calendar. One of the things I did want to mention, I mean, and since we're talking about this, I'm actually in the process of auditing everything. I'm going through, working with John Easterns and going through all of our cases. My real focus is to close these things, and there's just stuff that has been lingering for years, and my goal is to really to close both our administrative stuff, the federal stuff on the EEOC, OCR, and then also the tort cases. And part of that involves just going through figuring out where we're at in each of them and taking aggressive approaches to resolve them, both with our outside counsel and then through the issues that we're handling internally. I don't know, and I'm assuming, I sent out a lot of memos to the superintendent, and I know some of those are shared with the board relative to the number of OCR and EEOC cases. We've been closing quite a few of them, and the ones we're closing are the ones that were just filed. So again, it's a combination of just taking an aggressive approach. I think there are a lot of things that get filed against us that we have nothing to hide. We just, my thing with those agencies is, what do you need? We'll give it to you. Let's close this thing out.
And the second thing I was going to mention, he kind of touched on it before I could get to it in my comments, but I've asked for Attorney Williams to, and he's doing this through Lynn, his assistant, just making sure that we communicate to me what items that do get forwarded on the board is a standard practice, just to make sure that we continue to be consistent to what our practice has been. So those are the items that we do forward that on to, so that we do stay consistent.
Great. Okay. Ms. Giovanelli?
Sorry. So when do you think you'll be done with the auditing and maybe, sorry to.
No, I mean, realistically, it's gonna probably be a couple months, and I only say that because I work on it, and then something comes, then I have to do something else, and it's just something that I've wanted to get done. There's a couple projects I want to get done that get pushed back a little bit, but I'm doing it because just one, to stay organized, and two, to just make sure we're staying on track. What I found is we're making some adjustments in some of our outside counsel. I was not happy with some of the work that was being done on some of the cases, or lack thereof. I was not happy with some of the lawsuits that had dragged out, in my opinion, longer than needed to be dragged out, which again is an additional expense to the district. So now I'm working very closely. One of the things we're also doing is getting copied on pleadings, which I don't know if that happened in the past, but it helps us create a pleading bank of pleadings that can be used in future litigation should we bring some of that work in-house. So we will have a steady. I mean, a lot of these pleadings are repeat pleadings. They're the same type of lawsuits, same type of discovery, same type of answers and affirmative defenses. So it'll be very helpful as we continue to grow the office to have that type of resource available to the attorneys that work within the department. So.
Thank you. I look forward to your update.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to engage in public comment?
Are we done?
There is no member of the public here that's not an employee of the district, so we'll move on to the next item, which is board member comments. Ms. Vaughn?
I have none.
Ms. Fisher?
I have none.
Ms. Giovanni? Ms. Gittens?
Got to me too quick. Okay. All right, just, I think we need to clarify about the travel that we brought up this morning. And in speaking with Susan and Mary, the travel for the the December conference for FSBA is fine. We have plenty of time to do that because she doesn't have a deadline yet for making sure. Like I said, she's already made the reservations, but we have time to make any changes that are necessary. And regarding, I believe, Ms. Patrica and I attending the Finance 2.0, we have to have a hard vote on Monday at our meeting. However, if we could have at least a consensus at this meeting to give us an idea that it's going to go through, is that?
Yeah, I don't see that as. So I would say most conservatively that since this is something that is going to require a vote, you're still going to need to vote to approve the item. Does consensus basically amount to a soft approval? I mean, I think that it's okay. I will say that at the meeting, what you should do, and I will make sure that this is communicated so that everybody knows, is that there should be a motion to amend the approval of that item to include Ms. Patrica as well as the cost. And then that's something that you will accept as an amendment, and then you will go back and then vote on the item as it's amended.
And you're going to write all that out for me, aren't you?
Yeah, I will make sure that it gets communicated.
So that we make sure to do it.
I do understand that in light of the fact that there is a deadline of today, in order to determine whether or not there's going to be the funds expended, that a consensus is fine to discuss. I would leave it at that. I would not probably go any further in your discussion other than that.
Well, why don't we ask, is there anybody who has any negative comments about, is there anybody that's going to object? Is there anybody that's going to vote no on Monday night? Is there any?
That's why I was just saying the
Is there
consensus.
any negativity here? Are you going no matter what, assuming no crazy, weird things happen in your life? I'm going no matter what. I found a very last-minute fill-in for me at BUPAC on Thursday morning. Thank you, Dr. Savage. So my schedule's clear, so I think that probably covers it. Yeah?
Yes, sir?
Yeah. Chris, I just thought of something.
Please.
The alternates, we have not filled Debbie's alternate or my alternate. So.
So go to the order?
We keep forgetting, and so I want to bring that back up
Bring it up during go to the order?
today, or,
You can bring it up today during go to the order.
okay,
We're in the middle of board member comments right now, so go to
Okay.
the order.
okay, that's all I just want to.
Okay, and I had a couple other things. I think I mentioned this morning briefly about the training that Debbie and I attended, and two of the things that were really of interest were talking about collective bargaining, and the presenters for collective bargaining and the personnel and all of that were two attorneys that work throughout the state, and one is like the highest one that does most of the collective bargaining. So he mentioned the process of the board involvement in that, and there were two different things. There's collaborative bargaining versus collective bargaining. And in the collaborative bargaining, it was described as that we as a board meet with various parties that are involved and to kind of preliminarily discuss what's on the table, what we are willing to do, what we can do, before we even get to the process of the collective bargaining. So all of that is in the handouts that Debbie sent out already, and I would like to discuss it some more, maybe at our workshop. We can put it on as an agenda item to give everyone time to look through that and ask whatever questions. The two attorneys' names should be on the handouts as well, so that if you have comments or questions about it, then he can definitely follow up on that. The other thing that was talked about was the best and brightest, and about the decisions made for the expenditures of the money for best and brightest. So again, you have the handouts and the information and the contact if you have any questions, but I'd like to see what everyone says and discuss it further at a workshop. I went yesterday to Warner, is it Warner? The news agent, the TV studios.
Time Warner?
No,
Waterman.
Waterman.
Oh,
It's Time Warner in Chicago, it's Waterman here. I went to Waterman and sat in one of the most fascinating things I've ever done, and that's where all of the reporters, all of the staff, they're sitting around this table and all around the sides, and they're deciding what it is we're going to see on the news throughout the day. And everybody kind of pitches their idea of what they've been working on, and it was funny because I was telling my husband about it, and then we turned on the news at 5 o'clock, and I said, oh, they were talking about that this morning, or this person actually did get all the way across the county and interview 3 people for this interview. And it was very, very fascinating to see. I've visited the studio before, but not being involved in how they actually do run the place. And they wanted me to give the invitation to all of you as well to get with, and I have the name of the individual, to attend one of the meetings. It is very interesting. We did talk about the discussion that we had about putting minor students' pictures up, and they gave the explanation basically that, let's say there's a minor that does something really, really bad. They gave an example of 2 minors a few years ago that had started a fire that burned down like 12 houses in one particular area. And that they were definitely going to put their pictures up there. And I said, well, what about, for example, the young lady at G. Weaver? So they said the problem is they run the risk of being someone on this side saying, well, you're playing favoritism. You showed this one and you didn't show this one. So their idea is, rather than not showing any at all, they show them all. And they abide by what the sheriff says as well, that if it's a felony, it is fair game. And one of the gentlemen, the directors there, has children in the system, and he gave the example of his daughters saying, well, I didn't know this was happening, I don't know who this kid is, and the fact that if they do know it, they felt safer. I didn't quite understand and agree with all of their rationale, but the bottom line was that if they show one, they have to show all, so that there's not the perception of playing favorites. It's interesting. I get it. I understand their perspective, and yet it still is tough for kids. So if anyone is interested, I will definitely give you the information. They look forward to some of the rest of you coming and sitting in on their meeting. It really is an interesting thing to do. And I think that's all for right now. Thank you.
Ms. Jordan? I did hear the news last night, quote, Ms. Gittens. So that's why I knew you were there, because they mentioned your name. But speaking
And
of
a
the...
snippet of what I
It
said.
was very much a snippet. The FSCBA event that we just went to, I thought was really beneficial for all of us. That's why I went ahead and shared that with you. Because it was speaking about the school boards and human resources and what our issues and what our responsibilities are as board members. So to me, that was definitely crucial for us to understand, and which I loved, what was a good cause. They spoke to that in depth of what our role is regarding employees, and then even going back with the unions, speaking about how we have to always remember that they are our employees, and we have to make sure that we understand when we're speaking with them that we just keep that in mind. So I thought both of the presentations were really great. It was well worth, sitting and listening to all of that, because we came back with a lot more knowledge, and that's going to be beneficial to all of us, I think. So these meetings are really good for us.
Great.
That's it.
Ms. Morgan? I guess what I'll mention is that thanks to Amy Desamore and Cindy McClung, they put together some materials for me to do a presentation at BUPAC last week. I thought it went well. One of the things I did do was I gave some of the financials and some of the numbers from, I think it was '09, and then I did last year and this year, so that they could see the numbers in the context of where we had come from, particularly things like the rollback rate and the reduction from the rollback rate. I wasn't asked a lot of questions about the materials that I handed out, but I was asked one that suggested maybe it is helpful to have the context and the perspective. And the question was, are we going to be asking for more money? Because now they can see that over time, there has been an erosion. So anyway, they scrambled to get those numbers put together for me, and I just want to say thank you, and I think it was helpful to the community to see them. So those are my comments.
All right, I wanted to follow up. I told you guys a little bit about DC last week. I was supposed to be covering E-rate, but that quickly morphed into FEMA, because in our first meeting, a question was asked about FEMA, and thanks to Ms. Millay, I had significant information about FEMA in Lee County in the wake of Irma, and I just sort of spouted that out. And from that point forward, I became the FEMA person in all of our meetings. And I think you've had contact, I know you've had contact with a person in Congressman Rooney's office, and you guys are moving forward, and you'll continue to be in touch with me if you need more help from that office, right? I mean, they seem very willing to help. And the other thing that will take place is a delegation letter. So our Florida delegation in DC wants to, everyone we met with wants to sign a letter telling FEMA to move a little bit more quickly and be less bureaucratic. So I'm in the process of drafting that letter, which I will send to Ms. Millay, and then I'll send to FSBA, and FSBA will send it out. Yet again, Congressman Rooney expressed in front of my colleagues across the state his deep admiration and professional respect for Dr. Adkins, with specific regard to safety and security. That was one of the issues we talked about with all of our delegation members, and he quickly stated that you were way out ahead on that issue and that the kids in Lee County are in good hands with you at the helm. He never really misses an opportunity to sort of toot your horn, and I wanted you to hear that publicly. The legislative workshop yesterday, was it yesterday?
Tuesday.
Sorry, it feels like yesterday. I thought it was fantastic. I would have liked to have seen more physical presence by our actual delegates, but I understand that their schedules are busy, and I saw the people around me furiously taking notes. The staff members were furiously taking notes, so I feel confident that that information will be passed along. Almost all of us were at Carl Burnside's celebration this past weekend. On a personal note, my daughter attends his school, so I know how fantastic he is. And you know what's funny is a former student got up there and said, you know, my mother sat down with him during the school choice process and said, I'm worried about this and this and this and this and this. And Carl simply said, I'll take care of your son. And that was basically what Carl said to me. You know, he basically said, and he knows my daughter. He does. I mean, he knows her. And it's not just my daughter. He knows the kids in that school. He knows the staff in that school. And he's now our principal. He's in charge of high school, not in charge of, but
He's one of our principal leads. Yes.
so he's spreading that incredible spirit that he has, I guess, amongst all of the principals at the high school level. And people love working for him, and kids love going to his school. So I just thought that if there was a person who was deserving of that kind of a living sort of memorial, it was Carl Burnside for sure. And I just couldn't be more happy for him or for the community that he serves. And finally, last chance to tout Claus versus Jaws Friday night. Estero High School, 7 o'clock, be there, be square, be there, be square. What do you say? I'm not cool. Be there, be square. I was going to wear shirts that had been cut in half and sewn together, but that's not going to happen. Instead, I'm going to wear an Estero shirt and Bonita Springs earrings. That way,
You better take another shirt and change it after.
I know that they have a preference on the back, and I can't prefer either school.
She represents us all.
Okay, so Attorney Saunders, do you have any comment? Those are my comments, by the way. Attorney Saunders, any comments?
Madam Chair, I think Ms. Fisher.
I'm sorry, but I just want to back up because I neglected to report. Tuesday morning, I went to Naples to meet with Kathleen Passidomo, Senator Passidomo, and Lori Brooks and Leisha Roy came with me, and of course were able to eloquently answer all the questions that the senator had. And she was very well informed. She was very positive about it, and in the presence of Carol Green and Ashley Stasel, she gave her promise that she would take our priority forward in the Senate and encouraged us and gave us some information that we might want to follow up on in order to get some assistance from the House representation. And then at the round table, Spencer Roach said that he definitely is in our corner, and he will be working on it along with some of his colleagues. So I just wanted to report that because that was a positive outcome to that meeting.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate you going. I can't think of a better person, really, on behalf of this board to advocate for that
Well, no,
stuff
I
than
had
you.
staff with me who
Well, I
really, who
understand,
are the
but
real experts.
Elected
Yes.
to elected, I don't think there's a
Yes.
better. But you're right, staff certainly
Yes.
makes us look better, don't
They
they?
certainly do. Do it
Very good,
without-
thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Saunders,
Sorry.
did you have any comments?
Just very quickly, I was able to get in touch with RSM over the break with regards to the AG issue that we talked about this morning. They are aware. They have made contact. My office is making contact. With respect to the specifics and the argument, if any of you want to speak to me offline, I'd prefer to keep that conversation off the record with regards to our observations up to now. But we'll provide an update as soon as we can once we hear back from the AGs.
Thank you.
Dr. Atkins?
No comments at this time, thanks.
I know we have at least 2 items for good of the order. We'll start. Anybody else have an item for good of the order? I have one. Ms. Giovanelli?
Okay, so we still need to, and I'm sorry it had occurred to me after, when you said FSBA, so we still have to do an alternate for the FSBA legislative piece, right?
Correct. And then
And then the director alternate for my piece. So I believe Ms. Gittens wanted to be the alternate, right?
For which?
For Debbie's.
Legislative.
Legislative, okay. So do I need to can I bring that up for a motion at Tuesday,
You can bring it up
Monday's
for a
meeting?
motion, but is there anybody else interested? in
Yeah, is there
being the
anybody else that
alternate?
wants?
You're elected, sounds like, Ms. Giddens.
So does that get,
Speak up.
I'd recommend at an action
Well, yeah,
meeting on Monday. I think.
Monday.
yes,
think
of
it's
course, but I don't know who puts it on the agenda, or is it good of the order? How will that,
I'm going to be totally frank with you. If anybody, yeah, I was going
Yeah.
to be totally frank. I'm not sure how that would work.
It could be good of the order.
I mean,
Yeah.
we could, yeah.
Good of the order.
Well, I think an agenda, just an item, so that the vote can be taken place. Yeah, would be good.
Yes.
good cost, okay.
What's involved in the director thing?
It's the alternate for,
we have to have 2 alternates.
For legislative.
No, I don't mean that one, the director.
okay, so the director would be an alternate for me and then I end in June 2020. And then that position gets elected at the FSBA conference, summer conference. So we decide prior to that, which we need to make sure that's on, that the recommendation gets to FSBA for the vote, for the summer vote. So I think back when we talked about this in the prior, I know Debbie was interested in being my alternate, right? So I'm willing to nominate Debbie.
Anyone else?
Anybody else?
Interested? Great.
Okay,
Good.
all right, so can
Good cause item also, please.
those 2 things get added somehow and?
Yeah, let's talk about it offline. We may not need to do it that way. I just want to
Great,
make sure.
all right. Check, okay.
Thank you.
All right, my good of the order item is something that I sent out to you all a couple weeks ago about the Hispanic Heritage Month recognition, and I don't have the benefit of significant time on the board or time in the district to know the history of how this came about. But what I will tell you is this. We have learned that we're supposed to be implementing the platinum rule as opposed to the golden rule. And the platinum rule tells us that we should treat others as they want to be treated. And when that meeting ended, the overwhelming contact I got from leaders in the Hispanic community was basically that they felt dissed. And that we should have read that proclamation. That's not the word. I always say the wrong word. What's the word? Resolution, thank you. It doesn't even begin with a P, and I can never get the word right. we should have read that resolution aloud. So I have spoken with Jared Eady about this, and he suggested that perhaps each month, in order to keep our action meetings, actual action meetings where we function and conduct the business of the board without having too many proclamations or resolutions, I said it right, out loud, perhaps we should just stick to each ethnic resolution that we have upcoming. That way we're truly celebrating diversity of all shapes, colors, stripes, whatever, in the district. So I want to throw that out there because there is still time. I don't know that there's time to truly remedy the hurt feelings that were caused with a significant portion of our population, but perhaps try to right the wrong to the greatest extent possible, because that recognition goes through the 15th, and it's only October 3rd, so we could still read it during the Hispanic Heritage Month, and then make some kind of a decision as a board about how we're going to handle this in the future. So if I could go around and get everybody's comments, I know some people have the benefit of history and some don't. Can I start with you, Ms. Fisher?
Sure. So I would be in favor of reading those types of proclamations. It doesn't take that much longer, and I think it really adds to the information that the public receives, as well as avoiding hurt feelings and disrespecting anybody. I mean, because we have more than ethnicities, we have other issues that are of paramount importance to this community, and I think we should take the few minutes to read it out loud.
I would echo that as well. One of the things, I know we sometimes have the student read things. Would that be something that we would, I don't really know sometimes how long it is, if it'd be too much on, if they're nervous, but some of the students we have are excellent, and
They're more articulate
yeah.
than we are.
So, I mean, that would be maybe, because we all have a little task at the time, and I just thought that maybe including the student representative at the time, but no, we don't always have that, so then I don't know who divvies that up and how that is read, but.
Well, then generally, Ms. Johnson and Ms. Reeder will assign those duties.
Okay.
Ms. Giddens?
In regards to your last question, I mean, yes, I'm in total agreement of doing it. I liked your suggestion earlier, Ms. Patrica, about nationally recognized.
Yeah, but that list is as long as I am tall.
Oh, did you find out?
That is crazy long list.
Okay, so if we decide to do this as far as the student, my suggestion would be to speak with the student to see if they are willing to do it and let them opt in or out as they see fit. Some will be, thespians. I know that's a bad word right now. But, I know I shouldn't have. But, and want to do it, and others will be a little shy to do it. So I think if we give them the option, depending on whoever it is and what there is, and share it with the rest of us on the board. And are we deciding then, and when will we decide how and when or all?
Well, I think this is a protocol issue. This is not something that has to come before the board for a vote. So I think that after our discussion, I can recommend something, and we can either get consensus on that or not. I wanted to hear everybody out before I propose something.
And I kind of think it would be I don't know the word for it, but a group of a nationality type thing, as opposed to the Sisters of the American Red Flag or something.
Oh, agreed entirely. That's exactly what he said. He said ethnic and
Yes.
racial groups
Yes.
only. He
Yes.
did not,
Okay.
if we're truly going to be diverse and inclusive, then we need
Then
to
that's what we
recognize
need to do.
every ethnicity and every
Right.
race.
Okay, I mean, I'm in agreement.
Ms. Jordan?
Well, we just had an Italian, the
Yes.
Italian one just came up too, which I'm Italian, so you can read it to me offline, just saying.
And it's still your month,
It's still my
right? So
month.
we still have time to read yours.
But I definitely felt that,
I'm thinking more like
that there was a hurt
It's not actually a
which
it's Chinese.
we certainly do not want that ever to happen, because we're all this part of the same community.
Yep.
So if reading that is going to make everybody one, we need to do that.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that I think that most of our other sister governmental agencies do that out loud. Yeah.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I think a corollary to this, of course, is how do we put it out there at the end of the month? I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but it's going to take some interesting language to put it forth.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
In other words, we're not going to say, well, we forgot to read this. I mean, we have to have a smooth way to
Well,
put it out there.
I
at the
think
end
right
of the
now,
month.
what I'm acknowledging is my bad. I feel like I, as a board member, and I can't speak for everybody, I feel like I made a mistake here. And I'm genuinely sorry, and I'm trying to the greatest extent possible, right that wrong. So I don't know that we need to, I mean, this is the discussion. This is where we say that.
What I'm saying is, I'm happy to hear that, because, happy to have us say the resolution, but what I'm adding is that in discussing it, we need to have a smooth way of putting it out there at the end of the month.
I don't have any idea what you mean. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I understand what she's saying, but what I think has happened too, after that, and after we, that evening of that board meeting, when it was not read, we did see a lot of our community get up and they left because they felt slighted. And then especially after that, we went out to the community. I know I did. I've seen other members of this board going out and speaking to the community regarding this, the same issue and explaining. And from what their comments to me were, we live and we learn and we move forward. We thank you very much for, coming here and sharing this, and we move forward. So I don't think it would be too much to ask of them to come back, because they already know that they know I have said I was sorry, but because I made them feel a certain way. So I don't think that would be a problem.
No, thank you for understanding, because what I'm saying is, we have to have a way, are we going to say, a mistake was made and we're sorry? Are we going to say,
It's simple.
Misunderstanding.
that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying,
It
that you
goes
didn't
to-
understand?
It's learning and we move forward.
We're human beings.
Sorry, but we're celebrating this till the 15th of the month, so at the
Right,
next
so we
meeting,
have-
we can just read it out and say we're in, in the midst of celebrating Hispanic, Haitian heritage,
Hispanic heritage.
Hispanic heritage.
That covers
Sorry, Betsy, you threw me off.
anyone who is Hispanic, regardless of where you came from.
Any further feedback, Ms. Vaughn? Ms. Morgan?
No, that was it.
Okay, so yeah, I agree. We didn't make a mistake because we
Right.
followed our protocol. But we
Right.
have learned as a result of following our protocol that we need to revisit it, and we are doing that. I would suggest going forward that Jared Eady be the one who brings to the board any resolutions that he believes are appropriate for the board to present publicly, because otherwise, I mean, once we open this door, everybody is going to want to come through it, and some people represent the community and some don't, and we enter that problem. And so I think that we need to have some sort of a gatekeeper, and I would suggest that if our goal is to present ourselves as a diverse and inclusive community, that the decision about what comes forward as a public recognition in terms of reading a proclamation or reading a resolution, that recommendation ought to be made by the Diversity and Inclusion Office. Dr. Atkins, is there a sense of comfort with you asking Mr. Eady to make that recommendation to the board?
Yeah, that's fine.
Madam Chair, if I may, I didn't want to interrupt the flow of discussion, but as to your point about amending your protocols, it's something that the board, it's a process by which the board governs itself. So it doesn't need to be at a formal meeting, but I would recommend a vote, just so that you have a clear record that that was something that was decided upon for the board in terms of the way that it governs itself, and then we can just add a little amendment to your protocol.
And consensus is sufficient, right? It doesn't have to be an action vote at an action meeting. We can do consensus like we usually do, right?
Well, so I'd like to make sure that there is a clear record that the majority of the board
It'll be in the
was.
minutes for today's meeting.
Yeah, so okay, yeah, I'd apologize. There's more than one way to skin a cat. A lot of times there is a traditional vote for these things, but I think that consensus should be fine.
Excellent. Ms. Jordan, did you have one more thing?
No, just-
Ms. Reader? Great.
Someone else read it. It's also a question of getting it on the agenda in that manner.
Yep. Okay, so my comment is this. I do believe I did make a mistake. I, as an individual member of this board, made a mistake because the chair brought this before us at a workshop, and I disregarded her comments. I didn't understand the importance of what she was saying or the reasons why she was saying it. So my apology is not just to the Hispanic community, but to the board chair as well, because I just really feel like she brought it up, and I didn't give it the credit it was due. So,
Thank you for that.
Ms. Fisher, did you have anything to add? All right, so this is what I would like to propose.
We have one,
I was just going to say, maybe EDAC could have work with, EDAC with Mr.
he's on that committee.
Right, and that's the only thing I would add to that a little bit, that's all.
I believe that he and Crystal, they both have a list of all of those on the wall, all over his walls. So he's constantly concentrating on that.
But I think that's a good point,
But my
though,
point-
to bring it
with the
out
community.
to EDAC, because then they can kind of spread the word as well.
That's my point, because that's just, that's that community involvement that we work for, that's all.
So this is what I'd like to propose, that we change our protocols to allow for the reading of resolutions with regard to the recognition of specific racial or ethnic groups per the recommendation of Mr. Eady through the superintendent, and that the reading of those resolutions be rotated in accordance with the regular board schedule of rotation, and that it be incumbent upon each board member whose turn it is to read the resolution to first approach the student and see if the student is willing, able, and capable of reading that resolution, and if so, we turn it over to them. I think that covers everything, because in the summer, we're reading it, and when the students are here, they're reading it. So could we seek consensus on that suggestion? Everybody with thumbs up, thumbs down can live with it? Is there anything we could do to get you to be a thumbs up?
Can live with it.
Okay, so we've got 6 thumbs up and 1 live with it. Are there any other items for good of the order? Seeing no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ms. Morgan moved, Ms. Giovanelli second. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Meeting